So I have to ask, you've already rebooted the show once, obviously, rather successfully, I would say. So what made you want to come back again to do it all over again? And what was your approach and how was it different this time?
It was the chance to make it even bigger. I'm just hungry. And I can't believe that there are still people that don't watch Doctor Who. We got the highest viewing figures it's ever got. We were the #1 show in Britain. And we got amazing figures in other countries of the world, but just not enough. And so the BBC were ambitious. They always wanted the show to be bigger. They just believed in Doctor Who. It's an old, fantastic tradition of the BBC. The two things are woven together, Doctor Who and the BBC. And they've always had such faith in it. To have a proper television in Britain. You get Tarzan, you get Sherlock Holmes, and you get Doctor Who. And he's the one television legend. The others are from literature. But he's a proper British television legend. And there's not many of those. So there's this enormous pride. They wanted to take it forward into being a great big streaming show. They asked me, and I literally took 3 seconds to say, I completely agree. I had already independently, while not working for the BBC, I'd already thought the same thing about the show, that it was time to take it up a level. And as to how to do that, we go into a partnership with Disney Plus. We're going to have another 10 years of this government. In 10 years' time, everything we understand the BBC to be will be gone. So what you have to do is what we are heading towards, what the government wants, and what is going to happen, because I honestly think this battle has been lost, is we're heading towards some sort of subscriber service. And where the mistake then is made is that everyone, and this was in like the Radio Times letter page when you started this debate, and there were people on that letters page saying, why don't we have a subscriber service like HBO? Like HBO, one of the finest broadcasters in the world. Why don't I will pay my subscription fee, I will join in with HBO, that is what I'll get. People in this country have no idea what HBO is or what it means. And I spent the past few days going through the website. It's like, and I have to look at my phone to get some details, but on a week on HBO, so you've got 7 channels: HBO, HBO 2, HBO Signature, HBO Family, HBO Comedy, HBO Zone, HBO Latino. Doesn't that sound marvellous? You pay for that $15 a month, which is $180 a year, which equals like £118. So it's cheaper than the license fee. We think that's brilliant. What you get is no news, no voice, no soap opera, no weather. No radio stations, Radio 1, Radio 2, Radio 4, nothing like that. All you get are these 7 channels. This is what you get in this week. And bear in mind that this is in October, so it's like the sort of prime time. You get, on a Saturday, you get a 2-hour film, which you might have seen already, called Focus. Not a very good film. 14 minutes of boxing. 14 minutes of boxing. On a Sunday night is good. You get 2.5 hours of original programs, including The Leftovers, which is a great drama, Doll and M. Monday night, nothing. Nothing new at all. On Tuesday night, nothing. Nothing new at all. No new programs, no news broadcasts, no magazine programs, no Phil and Holly. This is what I'm saying. You pay a full subscription fee, which is practically the price of a license fee. You get nothing. People in this country say we should have subscriber service like HBO because it's the finest broadcaster in the world. It gives you nothing. All right, you get Game of Thrones. You get that for 10 weeks of the year. 1 hour a week. 10 weeks of the year, that's all you get. You're being led towards a subscriber service which you are being told is marvellous, and it's a lie. It gives you a couple of hours of good drama a week and nothing else. And that, in 10 years' time, is what they will demand the BBC becomes. And it is a disgrace. We'd look at Stranger Things and stuff like that. Love that show. But I'd just be jealous. I'd just be envious. And I'd also be sad that people were watching that and not seeing Doctor Who. We go into a partnership with Disney Plus because their shows are the best. And I love their ethos. I love their vision. I love their standards. And that was a very natural fit, especially when they're the ones bringing all the science fiction franchises to the screen so joyfully. I love those shows. So, that wasn't up to me. That was decided on a business level at the BBC, but I was very happy to go along with that.
Hi Russell, it was nice to see that historic footage of you defending the BBC, the universal service, the idea of public service broadcasting, the ethos of public service broadcasting, if you like, which is that it caters to everybody. We all pay into the pot, but we all get something out of it. In Britain, the BBC costs about £3 a week. You can't get anything in Britain for £3 a week. A coffee is $3.50, for God's sake. And that's not good coffee, that's machine coffee. But there are still some imbecilic people in this country, and by this country I'm talking about the United Kingdom, from whence I broadcast, that believe that the BBC is an outmoded, outdated fossil, an institution of yesteryear that has no business being funded by the public in an age where we're used to only giving our money in support of services that we have chosen ourselves, rather than a service which is constituted for all of us, which we pay toward. If you need to accept the principle that it's an inherently good thing to pay toward a universal service from which everybody in some measure benefits, then you're also the kind of person that thinks that libraries should be closed because you don't visit your local library, or that healthcare should be privatised because you can afford to pay for private healthcare and you resent having to be put in the same bracket as the riffraff, having to wait your turn. You probably don't go to museums, do you? You probably think fucking museums should be closed down. You don't visit them, so why should they exist? Why should anything of any value exist if you don't use it? Perhaps the government should have a referendum. Should the country pay for the arts, for cultural institutions? Or should they be let loose on the free market and allowed to wither and die because not everybody appreciates them? Not nearly enough people appreciate them to keep them buoyant all year round. I don't want to live in that country. That's a culturally illiterate country. That's a backward country. It's a country that knows the price of everything and the value of nothing, to coin an old Tory phrase. Russell, you used to understand this, but I fear you don't understand it anymore, do you? Because the only thing that the BBC produce, which apparently you value, is Doctor Who. And you've got Doctor Who, haven't you? You've done a little deal behind the scenes so that you've taken control of it through your company Bad Wolf. And because you produce it independently now, the BBC are just the people who sign the checks, but they're not really signing any checks, are they? I mean, they might be paying for, I don't know, your lunch, but you're getting your real salary from Disney. So it's Disney dollars which are paying for Doctor Who now because of a co-production agreement. And thanks to Disney, who frankly resemble the HBO that you were talking about 10 years ago, a subscription service that costs a fair bit but produces very little original content, has a few prestige genre shows which they peddle out to investors, but for the most part is a content library with a few new additional bits and pieces added periodically.
Monday night, nothing. Nothing new at all. On Tuesday night, nothing. Nothing new at all. No new programs, no news broadcasts, no magazine programs. No. This is what I'm saying. You pay a full subscription fee, which is practically the price of a license fee. You get nothing.
Sounds an awful lot like the HBO service you were describing, doesn't it, Russell? But because they're giving you extra money, because it will allow your work to be seen in Bolivia or Brazil, or fucking Cambodia, wherever. Well, who cares where the money comes from, right? Who cares if the BBC withers and dies? Who cares if it ceases to exist? Because you've planned ahead, haven't you, Russell? You've planned beyond its existence to a future where you're in control of the whole thing. You've inherently taken this publicly owned asset and you've acquired it via the back door. And you've got a bit of a trust fund from Disney to keep you going. So everything's fine. There are YouTubers out there, you know, who think that the BBC should be destroyed because it's used to produce a Doctor Who that had become increasingly woke. Now, the absurdity of this argument aside, the idea that you destroy an entire institution because it produces one thing that you find unpalatable. It's a bit like burning down your local curry house because they've changed the recipe of your favourite dish. You know, the sauce has a viscosity that it didn't quite used to have. So burn the fucking place down. The madness of that proposition aside, it's clearly insane. It fundamentally misunderstands that the BBC is to cater for all types of audiences, even those who are obsessed with identity politics. And that's probably what it thought it was doing when it gently encouraged its writers, Stephen, Chris, to go in that direction. Roussel, of course, requires no such encouragement. He is essentially wokeism on two legs. But the show's cultural character put to one side, the one thing that fundamentally distinguishes Doctor Who from other major science fiction franchises is its Britishness. That is its identifying cultural characteristic, isn't it? It's not whether it's perceived to be too gay or too trans friendly. It's that it's British. It has that element of self-deprecation that we associate with Britishness, that air of eccentricity. If it has these things, it's fundamentally Doctor Who in character, is it not? But here's the problem when you make a programme for an international audience, not a British audience. And this is a critique I would make of the current BBC, that they're far too focused on internationalism. Will the programme sell in other territories? If it won't, we won't make it. And that's not an institution that's thinking like a public service broadcaster funded by British taxpayers. That's an institution that's basically preparing for its own death and its transition to a commercial organisation. That's giving your enemies the ammunition to shoot you to bits. One of the side effects of making a programme for an international audience is that if you make a programme for such an audience, the same fate will befall it that's befallen most mainstream movies. They lose those specific things, those specific cultural hooks that give them their identity. I used to love a lot of movies. Hey, I'm using the word movies, an Americanism. When I was growing up, because particularly American movies, because they were exotic. They had a cultural identity of their own, a vocabulary of their own. It was more exciting to see a movie based in New York than one that was based in Blackpool. No offence to Blackpool, but you know I'm right. These days we go to the flicks and we see movies with international casts, which have moments and set pieces set in every city in the world. Everything's been smoothed over, sanded down, so that it will appeal to everyone. Men and women, every ethnic category you can think of, every nationality. What a wonderful formula for blandification. And what a guarantee that that thing that has been created will be insipid, boring, thin gruel, that has nothing of its parent culture about it. If that happens to Doctor Who, well, you may as well stop making it. Because Doctor Who is good old-fashioned British lunacy. Russell's gone to great lengths to pry Doctor Who away from the people that built it up as a brand, the British audience, and paid for it until very recently. Now, licence fee payers, though they don't know it, aren't paying for it anymore, and it has been wrestled from their control. Russell, will you ever have the guts to just come out and say this on TV? Just so people are clear about it. They don't own Doctor Who anymore, you do. Just tell them straight. And that will help them to understand, won't it, why the programme is going to, from now on, reflect your tastes, your sensibilities, not those of the great British public. Gesticulating a lot, aren't I, of late? Have you noticed that? I quite enjoy it, but I wonder if I'm overdoing it. Let me know what you think. So, I'm not going to say that, Russell, you've betrayed Doctor Who, and you've betrayed public service broadcasting, and you've betrayed the BBC, and yourself, and the things that you used to believe. Let other people say it. I'm merely making these points to contextualise what's to come. If in a few years' time Doctor Who doesn't really much resemble the show we used to watch, if it has become a truly internationalised product which seems to have one beady, blinkered eye on an American audience who, let's face it, will primarily be paying for it from now on, though there'll be an international flavour, of course, to cater for those other markets. Don't say you weren't warned. And on that positive note, let's review today's double bill. So, in true streaming style, the BBC released the first 2 episodes of Doctor Who simultaneously on their iPlayer, transmitted them both on Saturday evening, and presumably Disney Plus subscribers got 2 as well to suck on. And what did they find when they stumbled on these 2 fresh portions of Who? Well, they discovered that the lunacy was certainly present, the eccentricity doubly so, but also that this probably has to now be the camper show on TV. I mean, can you think of a more camp show? I can't. Look, Russell, this is what you like. This is your sensibility. This is who you are. Seems a little bit presumptuous to impose it on the rest of us, but okay, fine. That's what you want to do, that's fine. You want to kick off with a story about a space station operated by a group of babies that weirdly talk like 10-year-olds? Okay, I mean, it's a little bit weird. You want to revive the worst joke that Star Trek ever made about visiting a race where, there was nothing but mucus?
Did you, just pick your nose with a hand?
Of course! Picking our nose is a sign of respect among our people.
We believe boogers represent our essence and bind us to all things.
I mean, that Star Trek short was considered to be probably the worst piece of animation ever made, but you turn that concept into a Doctor Who episode? I mean, okay. Would have been my choice, but at least you didn't set the episode in a sperm bank. That's something, I suppose. Straight out of the blocks, you vouchsafed Chris Chibnall's contribution to Doctor Who. You mentioned the Timeless Child. Well, line one. That's very brave of you. Just to signal to us that that sort of canon clusterfuck is to be developed. It's funny because you talked in the interview I clipped from earlier about how you pick and choose your lore. You don't want to continue with the idea of the Doctor being half human as depicted in the 1996 TV movie. That's stupid. That's ridiculous. Get rid of that. Throw that out of the window. That's crap. Not going to use that. Just going to forget about that. But the Doctor being adopted and not being a real Gallifreyan, that stays in? I mean, maybe you shouldn't make these decisions in isolation, Russell. You know, get a team around you. Preferably half of which are heterosexual. Just see what they have to say. That's all I'm asking. Just bounce some ideas off them. Because this is going to be a shock to you, but there are still some old-fashioned Doctor Who fans still in the audience. They're clinging on for dear life, but they're still there. Give them something. That's all I'm asking. Just a nugget. Come on. They stuck with the show during the wilderness years. They bought the Virgin New Adventure novels. Did they do it to see a monster made of mucus ejected into space in a sort of poor rip-off of Alien? Did they stick with the show for all of those years to see a group of babies running a space station? Did they stick with the show all of those years so they could hear Murray Gold's hysterical orchestrations? Which, by the way, are... I know I keep saying it, but they are incredibly intrusive, Russell. Can't you get something done about it? Can't you just tell him to turn it down? When you watch the edit of each episode, don't you think to yourself, gosh, that's a poignant moment? Like when you were doing your moralising, editorialising bit and the Doctor was saying, you know, you can't be born wrong and everyone's the same and difference is a superpower, all of that stuff that you like to crowbar in, you know, so the story stops. That would have been a more poignant moment if it had been delivered without, you know, a bombastic orchestral accompaniment, don't you think? Come on, you know I'm right. Space Babies was really about refugees, about valuing refugees, seeing refugees as human. I suppose you thought it was a great idea to make them babies because that, you know, who could hate a ship full of babies? Who could turn them away? Diverse babies at that. You made a joke about visiting the Star Trek universe. You must never do that. Star Trek's in enough trouble, it doesn't need your help. So Space Babies was a pretty weak opener. Not an episode that's going to convince anybody who's never seen Doctor Who before to tune in going forward, despite your best attempts to introduce the Doctor Who concept to an audience in a couple of paragraphs. Why would they tune into this show? They must think it's sort of hysterical and puerile and stupid. You see the danger in not making it a serious show, Russell? I know it goes against all of your instincts, you know, to hype everything up and make everything camp and colourful, but I know you know, the people on X are going to love it. I can see the adulation already. But real science fiction fans, people who want serious, high-minded entertainment, are not going to be persuaded by this empty box of tricks. Sooner or later, you will need to give them some intellectual nourishment. A story to get their teeth into. Characters that they care about. Psychological intrigue. Yes? Which brings us on to episode 2, The Devil's Chord. I have some notes. I think it signalled the fact that Doctor Who must now be the campus show on TV by quite a way. I understand that the concept of it, A World Without Music, came about because you couldn't afford the rights to Beatles songs. Disney can't afford the rights to Beatles songs? Are you kidding? Of course they can! So I don't really know what that's about, but they do say that constraints produce creativity. Thank you for disproving that rule comprehensively. The Devil's Chord was a very, very silly show. But it's a sort of interesting core concept, I suppose, but a world without music, a world, you know, admittedly a world without music because some godlike lunatic, a drag act, had sucked all of the notes out of people. Did I believe that? Did I read it as an allegory that told us that camp destroys everything, all human joy, makes us sad and aggressive and warlike, and would lead to the destruction of the human race if we privileged that nonsense above all else? Yes, I believed it on that level, and I thought it was very brave of you to take that angle. But at the same time, deep down, I don't really think that's what you were saying. I think you were trying to tell a story about the value of the arts, about the importance of music and culture more widely. Quite a political duo of episodes, really, don't you think? You've got refugees in episode 1, the arts in episode 2. What a shame that your decision to get into bed with Disney sort of represents an act of cultural vandalism. That's a contradiction, isn't it? The Maestro was an interesting villain, almost unbearable to watch. Not because they were frightening, but just because, you know, drag acts are tiresome, aren't they? I didn't like the Doctor being so familiar with the Beatles. I've said it many times in my letters to your predecessors, but the Doctor should not have the same pop cultural knowledge as you and me. The Beatles matter to us. And when I say us, I mean obviously us, the British, us in the West, the Anglo-American audience that you might have had in mind. But let's just be clear. The Doctor, whether adopted or not, is from a culture thousands of years ahead of us, who has lived for thousands of years, gone around the universe, seen everything, experienced every kind of society, the arts on 1,000 planets, and yet, what, his favourite album, Sgt. Pepper? I mean, what the fuck are you talking about? You wouldn't know what that is. Ruby, sure, but the Doctor's not going to know. The Doctor's a fan of Cilla Black? Jesus Christ, that's a stretch for most humans. Just doesn't make sense, Russo. Come on, man. You know it doesn't. So, no more of that, please. That's what I'm saying. Jesus, you've already filmed 2 seasons of this stuff. I know nothing I say makes any difference, but I don't know. I have to believe that perhaps I can get through to you, and maybe as a consequence of this dialogue, you're going to go back, look at the episodes you've already got on the shelf and say, maybe we can make a few tweaks. It's not too late for reshoots. So the whole thing ended up with a music off. John Lennon, who had The World Without Music continued, he would have survived. Wouldn't have met Yoko. Wouldn't have been shot dead. So there was a good reason for it to continue. Not particularly if he wasn't going to meet Yoko. But he did, and he saved the day by completing the chord that would banish the maestro back to the world of the gods or whatever. We found out that the maestro was the son or daughter of the toy maker. There was another allusion to the one who waits, the big bad that awaits us at the end of this season, presumably. If it was going to be anything like Neil Patrick Harris or the villain in this episode, well, I mean, do they all get slightly camper as they go on? How much camp can you deploy? I mean, the screen can barely hold what you've already put out there. So in that respect, I'm scared. But I don't know. I thought about it, Russell, and I thought, what would a world without music look like? You can hardly imagine it, can you? A world without music. I mean, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Well, wait a minute. What? Next week's episode is written by Stephen Moffat? Stephen? We're back, baby! We're back!